Into tonight's news edition. His Majesty the King ends a working visit to New York, where he addressed the UN General Assembly and met world leaders. The Prime Minister says France has the largest investment in Jordan and pledges to create a suitable environment to attract more foreign capital. And the United States and China agree on the need for the UN Security Council to quickly adopt a binding resolution on eliminating Syria's chemical weapons. Good evening and welcome to the news. His Majesty the King concluded a working visit to New York, where he delivered a keynote address to the 68th session of the UN General Assembly. His Majesty met heads of states and delegations, taking part in the meetings, as well as US officials, intellectuals and political figures. During the meetings, the King reiterated Jordan's stance, which calls for a political solution to the Syrian crisis that ends the suffering of the Syrian people. Talks also covered efforts to bring closer the views of the Palestinians and Israelis to achieve peace based on the two-state solution. Before New York, King Abdullah paid a state visit to Beijing, where he held talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping and other senior officials on economic ties and means to further boost cooperation between the two countries. He also attended the first Jordanian-Chinese forum in the Chinese capital. The King also visited the city of Yinchuan and attended the opening of the China Arab Expo. In Shanghai, His Majesty visited the Jinshan Economic Development Zone and looked into the Chinese experience in the industrial estates and economic development zones. Prime Minister Abdallah Mansour met France's Minister in charge of French citizens abroad, Hélène Conway-Mouret, who is on a regional tour. Talks during the meeting covered Jordanian-French ties and means to further boost cooperation in various fields. Mansour expressed Jordan's appreciation for French investments in the kingdom, which ranks first among non-Arab investments in the country. He said Jordan is keen to attract more capital and create a suitable environment for economic growth. The two sides agreed that French ambassador to Jordan, Caroline Duma, prepare a study on French investments in the kingdom and the challenges investors face so that corrective steps can be taken. Talks during the meeting also dealt with the repercussions of the Syrian crisis on Jordan, which is hosting a large number of Syrian refugees. The Prime Minister also met Director General and Chairman of the Board of the Arab Monetary Fund, Jassim Al-Mannai. At the meeting, attended by the Governor of the Central Bank of Jordan, Mansour voiced Jordan's appreciation for the fund's support to Jordan's economy through the loans it offered. He added that the Arab Monetary Fund played its due role in offering developmental and technical assistance to Arab countries and institutions while staying away from politics. Al-Mannai said the Arab Monetary Fund has provided $600 million to Jordan through 19 loans, adding that the fund was keen to expand its activities and services in a number of fields. During the meeting, the Prime Minister was briefed on two loan agreements signed today by the government and the Arab Monetary Fund. The two sides also discussed means to increase future cooperation between Jordan and the fund in areas related to loans, training and technical assistance. Prime Minister Abdallah Mansour met representatives of telecommunications companies. The meeting, attended by Information and Telecommunication Technology Minister Azzam Slait, is part of the government's policy to keep channels open with the private sector to address challenges facing it. Mansour was briefed about the needs and demands of companies operating in this sector. He said telecommunications is one of the key sectors backing up the national economy, adding that the government was keen to support it to carry out its vital role. He also called for addressing challenges facing those companies in order to improve services they provide to consumers. Minister of Foreign and Expatriate Affairs Nasser Judi affirmed the importance of meeting the needs of the Syrian refugees and their hosting countries. He asserted that it is of the utmost importance to deal with the consequences of hosting refugees on the host countries on the long run. Judy's statements came during a ministerial consultation on the humanitarian situation in Syria and neighboring countries in New York yesterday on the sidelines of the 68th regular session of the UN General Assembly. Judy added, that the situation in Syria is getting worse because the nature of the conflict is becoming sectarian, which increases the level of violence in addition to the use of chemical weapons. He called on the international community to help in shouldering the responsibility of the Syrian refugees and in supporting their hosting countries. He said Jordan will not close its borders in the face of Syrian refugees.
But the question is not about opening or closing borders, it's about the ability of Jordanian services and the Jordanian infrastructure and resources to endure these continuing and increasing pressures. We have to be supported in order to maintain our proud tradition of hosting refugees, a tradition that constitutes both a national character as well as a source of national pride to Jordanians. This tradition today is challenged by the realities of numbers and statistics that are beyond the endurance of Jordanians, as the country is undergoing severe economic hardship, and as Syrians in certain sectors are competing with Jordanians even on job opportunities. Syrians, it is estimated, have occupied 160,000 jobs normally occupied by Jordanians just in 2013. Sustaining this tradition is becoming extremely challenging, if not difficult. The crisis in Syria, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, has proven to be of a magnitude that is beyond the capabilities of one individual country.
And also on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Judah participated in a meeting of the Donor Coordination Group for the Palestinian People, the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee. The committee is a 15-member body that serves as the principal policy-level coordination mechanism for development assistance to the Palestinian people. Judah called for refocusing on the economic challenges facing the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. He reviewed Jordan's efforts to revive peace negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis and establish an independent Palestinian state. Judah also took part in the Friends of Yemen meeting that was held in New York. He reiterated Jordan's support of Yemen's unity, sovereignty and independence, adding that the kingdom will not spare any effort to provide support to Yemen, safeguard its security, stability and prosperity. The minister said Jordan rejects any interference in Yemen's internal affairs or tampering with its internal security, pointing to the support provided by the Jordan Armed Forces to Yemen to restructure its army. He said the Jordan Armed Forces and the Yemeni Defense Ministry had signed a cooperation agreement. Over to the Syria crisis. A U.S. official says the United States and China have agreed on the need for the UN Security Council to quickly adopt a binding resolution on eliminating Syria's chemical weapons. Russia said it's ready to help guard Syrian chemical weapons sites, but will not ship any of the chemical arms to Russia for destruction. Here's an update.
UN chemical weapon investigators continue their work in Syria, inspecting various spots as they probe allegations of chemical weapons use. One of the team's tasks is to gather evidence from an alleged attack on March 19th against the town of Khan al-Asal in the northern province of Aleppo. Chemical weapons are said to have been used in at least 14 locations. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov agreed this month to a deal to scrap Syria's arsenal of chemical weapons. Under the deal, inspections of chemical weapons sites are to be completed by the end of November, and its entire arsenal. Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said his country is ready to help guard Syrian chemical weapons sites and destroy President Bashar al-Assad's stockpiles, but will not ship any of the chemical arms to Russia for destruction. Russia and the United States are the only countries with industrial-scale capacity to handle mustard, VX, sarin, or cyanide armed munitions, but the import of chemical weapons is banned under U.S. law. Ryabkov said Russia would not import chemical weapons either, adding that the destruction of chemical weapons on Syrian territory is the best option, as the Chemical Weapons Convention prohibits the export of such weapons as well, setting in motion a diplomatic effort that led to Russian assistance in persuading Syria to agree to give up its chemical weapons. The U.S. has stepped back from launching unilateral military action against Syria after the August 21st poison gas attack. Yet in an interview aired on Venezuelan state television, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad said he does not rule out a U.S. strike.
The
The possibilities for an offensive will always be present. At one moment under the pretext of chemical weapons, other times the pretext will be different. The important thing is that for decades, the United States is exceeding the Security Council, violating the United Nations Charter and the sovereignty of states, violating all human and moral values. Perhaps we should take that possibility into account everywhere in the world, and this is what we do in Syria.
The Syrian conflict goes on with the capital coming under attack. A mortar shell hit the Iraqi consulate in Damascus, killing an Iraqi woman and wounding 4 others. With its building being damaged, it was not clear whether the consulate located near the United States and the Chinese embassies was deliberately targeted. Government forces meanwhile bombarded Homs with rockets and other heavy weapons as they attempted to root out rebel fighters, as the strategic town has been the scene of weeks of conflict. Zain Abu Sufa for the news at 10.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said he looked forward to a good meeting today with Iran and major powers. But he would not say what Iran needs to do to show a genuine desire to address its nuclear program. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif was meeting his counterparts from Britain, China, France, Germany, Russia and the United States to discuss the Iranian nuclear issue. Iran's new government is stepping up a campaign at the United Nations General Assembly to project a more moderate image abroad. Tehran said it wants to jumpstart talks with world powers to resolve a decade-long dispute over its nuclear program and hoped for a deal in 3 to 6 months. Iran has been negotiating with major powers known as the P5+1 about its nuclear program. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said in a television interview he believes future talks between the US and Iran are possible.
Well, after all, we're speaking of 2 countries who have had no relations for 35 years. So it's clear that to begin talks requires some preparation work. And whenever the prep work is completed, I believe that it's possible to have a meeting. Perhaps if we had more time here in New York, we may have been able to coordinate what was necessary for that meeting to take place. We must all admit, I believe, that the principle of the meeting of the 2 sides is indeed important.
Sudan's foreign ministry denied President Omar Hassan al-Bashir decided not to attend the UN General Assembly in New York. It said his visa application was still pending. The ministry renewed its call for the United States to carry out its duty as the country hosting the United Nations and issue the entry visa. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Bashir. In Khartoum, demonstrators took to the streets to attend the funeral of a protester who was killed in unrest over fuel subsidy cuts announced by Bashir and demand the departure of the Sudanese leader. At least 29 people have been killed in protests in Khartoum over fuel subsidy cuts, the worst outbreak of unrest in the Sudanese capital in years. Thousands of protesters torched cars and petrol stations in central areas of the capital, sending thick plumes of black smoke into the air. Somali militants who were behind a weekend assault on a Nairobi shopping mall claimed responsibility for an attack today on a police post in Kenya's northeast region. 2 officers were killed and another was injured in today's attack. 12 vehicles were also burnt in a raid on an assistant county commissioner's office in Mandera, which the ministry blamed on criminals. The latest incidents come just days after Saturday's assault on a Nairobi shopping mall by Al-Qaeda-aligned Al-Shabaab militants. The attack killed at least 72 people, including at least 5 of the attackers. Several foreigners were among the civilian victims. Foreign forensic investigation teams joined their Kenyan counterparts as they began examining the Westgate shopping mall. US, British and Israeli agencies are helping Kenyans investigate the attack. The leader of the Al-Shabaab, Ahmed Goudani, confirmed his group was behind the mall attack and warned of more strikes in the country. He said the raid was in retaliation for Kenyan troops' incursion in 2011 into southern Somalia to crush the insurgents. Oracle Team USA prevailed in a dramatic winner-take-all showdown with Emirates Team New Zealand to win the 34th America's Cup. The American team completed a stirring comeback that helped make the once troubled event among the most exciting in sailing history. For Oracle, the win was an extraordinary sporting triumph, one that saw the team climb back from a seemingly insurmountable 8-1 deficit in the best-of-17 series to keep the trophy it won 3 years ago. The thrilling final races were also a ringing vindication of Oracle owner Larry Ellison's controversial decision to transform a once-staid yachting event into a TV-friendly, extreme sports spectacle featuring huge, high-speed catamarans that might draw a new generation of enthusiasts to the sport. The International Olympic Committee, the IOC, praised Russia's preparations for the Winter Olympics in Sochi, saying the sporting venues were ready and the Games would be a fabulous experience. The IOC said in a statement its coordination commission or inspection team had given the organizers positive feedback in their final visit to the Black Sea city before the event kicks off in February. Russian authorities have said several times before that Russia would be able to guarantee safety of athletes and spectators at the Sochi Olympics 2014 and that there would be no discrimination on sexual, racial or political basis. Finally, a quick look at the weather. Pleasant tonight in most regions with northwesterly light winds. Tomorrow, nice weather is in the forecast in hilly areas, but it will remain relatively hot in the Jordan Valley, while winds will be easterly light, changing to northwesterly moderate in the afternoon hours. Further south, the Gulf of Aqaba should expect a relatively hot day tomorrow with northerly brisk winds and slightly high seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. His Majesty the King ends a working visit to New York, where he addressed the UN General Assembly and met world leaders. The Prime Minister says France has the largest investment in Jordan and pledges to create a suitable environment to attract more foreign capital. And the United States and China agree on the need for the UN Security Council to quickly adopt a binding resolution on eliminating Syria's chemical weapons. And that's the end of tonight's news. I'm Raad Labtouche. Thanks for being with us. Have a good night.